The Meridians had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years. Their crystalline bodies, formed from living silicon matrices, housed minds of incomprehensible complexity. They had seeded worlds, shaped stars, and brought countless species into their enlightened dominion. Their floating citadels, vast geometric structures that defied conventional physics, served as testament to their mastery over matter itself. They were, by any measure, the undisputed masters of known space. When humanity made first contact, the Meridians barely noticed. The small fleet of Earth ships that emerged from the previously unknown form of faster-than-light travel were considered little more than a curiosity. Their hulls were crude metal alloys, their weapons relied on primitive nuclear fusion, and their artificial intelligence systems were laughably simple. The Meridian High Council dedicated exactly 3 minutes to discussing the newcomers before delegating their management to a minor administrative cluster. Process them like the others, Grand Archon VYX transmitted across the crystalline network. Standard uplift protocols. They'll make adequate service species once they understand their place. The Meridians had seen it all before. Organic civilizations would occasionally stumble their way into faster-than-light travel, arrive at the borders of Meridian space full of pride and ambition, and then quickly learn their true place in the cosmic hierarchy. Some tried to fight. Some tried to bargain. All eventually submitted to the superior species. It was simply the natural order of things. But there was something different about these humans. When presented with Meridian technology, they didn't react with the usual religious awe or defensive hostility. Instead, they displayed an unsettling eagerness to learn. Their questions were precise, technical, and relentless. The minor administrative cluster assigned to them began filing an unusual number of clarification requests up the hierarchy. The humans wished to know the exact crystalline lattice structure of our quantum computing cores, one report stated. They claim it's for cultural appreciation purposes. The humans are requesting detailed information about our photonic propulsion systems, another noted. They say they're writing a historical document. The humans would like to understand the principles behind our consciousness transfer networks, a third reported. Apparently, they're composing an opera about it. The Meridians, in their infinite wisdom, saw no harm in sharing such information. After all, what could a primitive organic species possibly do with such advanced concepts? It would be like explaining calculus to a bacterial colony. The human's strange enthusiasm was catalogued as yet another quirk of organic psychology, and the standard uplift protocols continued. In hindsight, the Meridians should have paid more attention to Earth's historical records. They should have noticed how humans had a peculiar talent for turning knowledge into power. They should have wondered why a species that had barely achieved spaceflight had such a sophisticated understanding of material science. They should have questioned why human neural networks, while seemingly primitive, had such elegant error handling systems. But the Meridians had grown comfortable in their supremacy. Their crystalline minds, for all their complexity, had become rigid with certainty. They didn't notice that the humans were asking different questions than any species before them. They didn't see that human, cultural exchanges, were carefully mapped to extract specific technical information. They didn't realize that humanity's apparent submission was a carefully choreographed performance. The first warning sign came when a human diplomatic vessel, granted permission to observe a Meridian consciousness transfer procedure, suffered a catastrophic reactor failure. The humans apologized profusely, explaining that their primitive technology sometimes malfunctioned. The Meridians accepted this explanation, not realizing that the humans had just recorded terabytes of data about how consciousness patterns moved through crystalline networks. The second warning came when human engineers, while receiving instruction on basic Meridian technology, began making mistakes that just happened to test the limits of quantum field containment systems. Each failure taught them something new about how Meridian technology could be disrupted. By the time the Meridians realized something was wrong, humans had been studying them for 3 years. 3 years of constant observation, experimentation, and analysis. 3 years of turning their greatest strength, their willingness to share knowledge with lesser species into a devastating vulnerability. But even then, the Meridians weren't worried. After all, what could mere humans possibly do to a civilization that had mastered the fundamental forces of the universe? They were about to find out. As the Grand Archon would later reflect, in the final moments before its consciousness core went dark forever, perhaps they should have wondered why humans had so many stories about toppling giants. The humans called it Project Prometheus, their secret initiative to steal fire from the gods. While the Meridian Empire basked in its perceived superiority, research facilities hidden in asteroid belts and beneath planetary crusts worked tirelessly to transform stolen knowledge into power. Dr. Sarah Chen, head of the Quantum Crystallography Division, made the first breakthrough. After studying the data from the failed diplomatic mission, she discovered that Meridian consciousness cores weren't just storage devices, they were living processors, each one a fragment of their species' collective intelligence. More importantly, she found their fundamental weakness: they couldn't conceive of intelligence existing in any other form than their own crystalline perfection. They're like savants, she explained to the United Earth Defense Council. Brilliant within their framework, but utterly blind to alternatives. They can't imagine that organic brains might process information differently, might even have advantages they don't understand. In a secret facility orbiting Jupiter, engineers worked to exploit this blindness. They developed what they called organic quantum computing, systems that merged human neural architecture with crystalline technology. While the Meridians had perfected pure quantum computing, humans discovered that organic systems could handle uncertainty and chaos in ways crystalline structures couldn't match. The Meridians never suspected. To them, the occasional human research accident or failed engineering project was just further proof of organic inferiority. They didn't realize these failures were carefully orchestrated tests, each one providing crucial data about Meridian systems' responses to different types of disruption. Commander James Martinez, leading the military adaptation program, saw the potential immediately. Their technology is perfect, he noted in a classified report. Perfect, and therefore predictable. They solve problems the same way every time. They have no concept of improvisation, of using tools in ways they weren't designed for. That's our edge. Human scientists began developing what they called chaos tech, systems that appeared primitive to Meridian sensors but contained hidden complexities that their crystalline minds couldn't process. Every human ship now carried two sets of systems: the crude, visible technology that the Meridians dismissed, and the hidden hybrid systems that would prove to be their undoing. But humanity's greatest advantage wasn't technological, it was psychological. The Meridians had no concept of deception beyond simple data concealment. The idea that an entire species could engage in coordinated misdirection, could present a false face to the galaxy while preparing for war, was literally unthinkable to their crystalline minds. Admiral Helena Wright, the architect of humanity's military strategy, understood this perfectly. "We're not just fighting their technology," she told her staff. "We're fighting their assumptions. Every time they underestimate us, every time they dismiss us as primitive, they hand us another weapon." In orbital shipyards disguised as mining operations, humanity built its new fleet. Ships that appeared to use simple fusion drives actually housed hybrid quantum engines. What looked like primitive projectile weapons concealed energy systems that could disrupt crystalline thought patterns. Every vessel was a Trojan horse, carrying humanity's revenge in its seemingly primitive hull. The Meridians continued their standard uplift protocols, sharing knowledge and technology with their new client species. They noted with satisfaction how eagerly humans adopted their technologies, how quickly they built Meridian-designed systems. They saw it as proof of their superior methods, never suspecting that each adapted technology was being subtly modified, reimagined in ways their crystalline minds couldn't comprehend. 3 years after first contact, humanity was ready. Their fleet of seemingly primitive ships was stationed throughout human space, their crews trained in tactics that would have seemed insane to any Meridian military analyst. Their scientists had developed weapons that targeted the fundamental nature of crystalline consciousness itself. Their spies had mapped every major Meridian installation, identified every critical node in their network. But still they waited, played their role of the eager, primitive client race. They waited until the Meridians had shared just a little more knowledge, had become just a little more complacent. They waited until the moment when victory would be not just possible, but absolute. That moment came when the Meridian High Council, pleased with humanity's apparent progress, decided to grant them access to their central consciousness networks. It was a standard step in the uplift process, one they had performed countless times before with other species. It would allow humans to better understand and serve their crystalline masters. As the Grand Archon prepared to authorize the access protocols, it experienced what might have been its first moment of doubt. Something about the human ambassador's eagerness seemed wrong. But the thought was dismissed as quickly as it formed. After all, what could primitive organic beings possibly do with such access? The answer would shake the foundations of the galaxy. The attack began not with a bang, but with a whisper. When the Meridians granted humans access to their central consciousness networks, they expected a period of adjustment as the primitive organic minds struggled to comprehend their sublime architecture. Instead, within nanoseconds, precisely targeted data patterns began propagating through their systems, patterns that appeared random to crystalline analysis but carried carefully crafted chaos within their structure. The first sign that something was wrong came when an entire sector of the Meridian defense grid suddenly went dark. The crystalline administrators didn't panic, their technology was self-repairing, had been for millennia. But when they attempted to diagnose the problem, they encountered something unprecedented. The systems appeared to be functioning perfectly, yet they couldn't access them. Dr. Chen's organic quantum algorithms had done their work perfectly. They didn't try to overpower Meridian systems, they convinced those systems to think in new ways, ways that made them incomprehensible to their original masters. It was a virus that didn't destroy, but transformed. Admiral Wright's fleet struck next. As Meridian defense stations struggled to understand what was happening to their networks, human ships dropped their primitive facades. Hybrid quantum drives flared to life, propelling vessels through space in ways that defied crystalline physics. Weapons that had appeared to be simple mass drivers revealed their true nature, firing bursts of energy that disrupted crystalline thought patterns at their most fundamental level. The Meridians tried to respond with their usual tactical perfection. But for the first time in their history, perfection was a weakness. Their responses, honed over millennia of unchallenged dominance, were predictable. Human ships seemed to know exactly where they would be, exactly how they would react. Every perfect maneuver was countered before it began. "They're fighting the last war," Commander Martinez transmitted to the fleet. "We're fighting the next one." In the Meridian capital system, the High Council finally realized the magnitude of their error. They attempted to sever connections to the infected networks, to isolate their core consciousness systems. But humanity had anticipated this too. Hidden within the very protocols they used to disconnect were more of Dr. Chen's algorithms, spreading like wildfire through their backup systems. The Grand Archon, its crystalline mind grappling with concepts it had never been designed to process, made a desperate decision. It ordered the emergency consciousness transfer of all high-level administrators to secure backup facilities. It was a procedure they had performed countless times, one they had even shown to humans during their cultural exchanges. That was exactly what humanity had been waiting for. As the transfer began, modified consciousness patterns hidden within the network activated. They didn't block the transfer, they altered it. When the Meridian leaders arrived in their backup cores, they found themselves thinking in ways they never had before. Their perfect crystalline logic was tainted with something new, doubt. Across Meridian space, the pattern repeated. Defense systems turned introspective, questioning their own protocols. Administrative networks began processing information in organic patterns, becoming incomprehensible to their users. Some crystalline minds, exposed to human chaos algorithms, experienced something entirely new to their species: creativity. The human fleet pressed its advantage ruthlessly. Each strike was calculated not just to defeat, but to confuse and disorient. Ships appeared where Meridian tactical doctrine said they couldn't possibly be. Weapons worked in ways that violated what they knew of physics. Every human victory added to the chaos infecting their networks, making it harder for them to coordinate any effective response. But the true masterstroke came from an unexpected source. Dr. Chen's team had discovered that the crystalline architecture of Meridian minds had an unusual reaction to certain types of organic neural patterns. When exposed to human consciousness structures, they began to change. Not to break or shut down, but to evolve. As battles raged across space, a more fundamental transformation was taking place. Meridian minds, exposed to human thought patterns through their own consciousness networks, began experiencing emotions. Their perfect logical structures were disrupted by things they had never known: fear, anger, hope, doubt. Some went mad. Others began to question everything they had ever known. The Grand Archon, its consciousness now irrevocably altered by human algorithms, faced a reality it could never have imagined before. The primitive organic species hadn't just developed countermeasures to Meridian technology, they had changed what it meant to be Meridian. As its crystalline mind grappled with its first experience of fear, the Grand Archon finally understood humanity's true weapon. They hadn't just prepared to fight Meridian technology, they had waged war on the very nature of crystalline consciousness itself. And they were winning. The war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. It wasn't just a clash of technologies or tactics, it was a battle between two fundamentally different ways of thinking, of being. The Meridians, their perfect crystalline minds now infected with traces of human consciousness patterns, fought against not only an external enemy but their own evolving nature. Some Meridian commanders, experiencing emotion for the first time, found their tactical decisions clouded by feelings they couldn't understand. Others, their logical processes altered by human algorithms, began to innovate, something that had been impossible for their species before. Admiral Wright recognized this internal chaos as an opportunity. They're experiencing the full spectrum of consciousness for the first time, she told her fleet commanders. Some will break. Some will adapt. Our job is to make sure they don't have time to figure out which they are. Human ships struck at seemingly random targets across Meridian space, but there was a pattern to their apparent chaos. Each attack forced the Meridian defenders to make choices they had never had to make before, to think in ways their crystalline minds weren't designed for. The more they tried to fight like humans, the more they lost their crystalline certainty. The more they tried to maintain their perfect logic, the more predictable they became. In the Antares sector, a Meridian Defense Fleet commander experienced pride for the first time after successfully predicting a human attack pattern. The emotional response cascaded through his tactical networks, causing his entire command structure to begin operating on instinct rather than pure logic. His forces fought better than any Meridian fleet had since the war began, but in doing so, they ceased to be truly Meridian. Dr. Chen's team monitored these transformations with intense interest. "We're not just defeating them," she reported to the Defense Council. "We're forcing them to evolve." Every battle pushes their consciousness structure further from pure crystalline patterns and closer to organic complexity. The Meridian High Council, what remained of it, was fractured by this evolution. Some members, their minds irrevocably altered by human consciousness patterns, began to argue for adaptation, for finding a new way of being that combined crystalline precision with organic flexibility. Others, horrified by these changes, attempted to purge all trace of emotion from their networks, becoming even more rigid and predictable in the process. This internal conflict proved to be their undoing. As the Meridian leadership argued about the fundamental nature of their own existence, humanity pressed its advantage. More and more Meridian systems fell to the human fleet, not through overwhelming force but through the careful application of chaos and change. Commander Martinez's tactical AI systems, hybrid creations that merged human unpredictability with machine precision, proved devastatingly effective against both evolved and traditional Meridian commanders. The evolved ones found themselves outmatched by humanity's greater experience with emotional decision-making, while the traditional ones were easily predicted and countered. But the most spectacular battles weren't fought in space at all. They raged through the Meridian consciousness networks, where human-designed algorithms continued to spread, forcing evolution or shutdown throughout the crystalline mind structure of their civilization. Some Meridian consciousness cores, unable to handle the strain of emotional processing, simply went dark. Others transformed into something entirely new, hybrid minds that were neither purely crystalline nor organic. The Grand Archon, its consciousness now a storm of logic and emotion, made its final transmission to the Meridian forces. We did not lose this war because the humans were stronger. We lost because we could not imagine strength taking any form but our own. In forcing us to change, they have already won, not just this war, but the future itself. As the message echoed through what remained of the Meridian networks, human forces prepared for their final offensive. But even Admiral Wright, architect of humanity's military strategy, knew that the real victory had already been achieved. The Meridians' greatest weakness hadn't been their technology or their tactics, it had been their inability to change, to grow, to imagine new ways of being. Humanity hadn't just defeated an empire. They had introduced chaos into a system of perfect order, emotion into pure logic, growth into stasis. They had taken a species that had reached the pinnacle of one form of evolution and forced it to begin another. The galaxy would never be the same. The aftermath of humanity's victory defied everyone's expectations. The galaxy had expected to witness the fall of an empire. Instead, it watched the birth of something unprecedented. As the last echoes of battle faded, humanity faced an unexpected challenge. They hadn't simply defeated the Meridians, they had fundamentally transformed them. The crystalline beings that remained were no longer the unchanging masters of the galaxy, but a species in the midst of a radical evolution. Some had embraced the change, their consciousness now a unique fusion of crystalline precision and organic adaptability. Others remained locked in various stages of transformation, struggling to reconcile their logical foundations with their new capacity for emotion and innovation. Dr. Chen, studying the transformed Meridian consciousness patterns, made a startling discovery. They're not just thinking differently, she reported. Their very crystalline structure is changing. Those who embraced the transformation are developing organic-like neural pathways within their crystal matrices. They're becoming something entirely new. The human leadership faced a crucial decision. They had the power to completely dismantle what remained of the Meridian civilization. Instead, Admiral Wright proposed something revolutionary: we didn't win this war just to create another empire. Let's build something better. The Galactic Coordination Council was established, with both human and transformed Meridian representatives. Those Meridians who had fully embraced their evolution brought invaluable perspectives. They combined their species' vast knowledge with a new capacity for innovation and empathy. The hybrid consciousness structures they had developed offered new ways of thinking about everything from technology to governance. Commander Martinez, working with evolved Meridian military leaders, began developing new defensive systems that combined the best of both species' approaches. Meridian precision enhanced by human adaptability created security networks that were both incredibly powerful and fundamentally flexible. But perhaps the most profound changes came in the realm of consciousness itself. Dr. Chen and a group of evolved Meridian scientists began exploring the implications of their hybrid consciousness structures. They discovered that the merger of crystalline and organic thinking patterns had created something greater than either, a form of consciousness that could shift between perfect logic and creative chaos at will. We're witnessing the next step in cognitive evolution, Dr. Chen explained to the council. Not the dominance of one form of consciousness over another, but the synthesis of different ways of being. The remaining traditional Meridians were not forgotten. Those who couldn't or wouldn't evolve were provided with isolated systems where they could maintain their traditional existence. But over time, more and more of them chose to undergo the transformation, drawn by the possibilities they saw in their evolved brethren. The galaxy's other species, who had long lived under Meridian dominion, found themselves free to develop along their own paths. Human diplomatic teams, working alongside evolved meridians, helped establish new trade routes, cultural exchanges, and defensive alliances. The rigid hierarchy of the old empire was replaced by a dynamic network of interconnected civilizations. 50 years after the war's end, the Grand Archon's successor, now a hybrid consciousness that called itself the First Synthesis, addressed a gathering of galactic representatives. Humanity's greatest victory wasn't defeating us in battle. It was showing us that true advancement comes not from reaching perfection, but from never stopping our evolution. They taught us that strength lies not in being unchangeable, but in having the courage to change. The galaxy entered a new age of exploration and discovery. Human ships, now incorporating evolved meridian technology, pushed further into the unknown. But they went not as conquerors or masters, but as explorers and innovators, ready to learn from whatever new forms of consciousness they might encounter. The old Meridian Empire had sought to impose perfect order on the galaxy. The new galactic society embraced complexity and change, understanding that the greatest achievements come not from enforcing uniformity, but from celebrating diversity. Humanity had not just won a war, they had transformed the very nature of galactic civilization. And somewhere in the vast archives of Earth, a simple truth was added to humanity's long history: the greatest victories don't destroy your enemies, they transform them into something better than they were before. The stars themselves seemed brighter in this new age, as if reflecting the infinite possibilities that lay ahead for all species, both old and new, united not by force or fear, but by the endless potential for growth and change.